Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien vs. Predator Galaxy podcast. This is regular host Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me as always are my regular partners in crime,
RidgeTop, or Adam Zeller, as I'm known in the real world.
Eric Adams, otherwise known as Xenomorphine on the forums.
And this is episode 115, and this we're back to Alien. I said we'd have some Alien-related podcasts after the last couple of months worth of Predator, and it's one I've really been looking forward to, even though I'm not necessarily sure how today's going to go, because it's not something I'm used to talking about in too much detail. But it's a game that Adam and I and some of the other guests who will be introduced shortly have been enjoying for about a year now. The game's been out a year. And what we're going to be discussing is the Alien role-playing game. So to help us out on this one, we are joined by another regular community contributor to the podcast, Mr. Chris Travis.
Hello, everyone.
Also known as Shevvie. And the next face/voice will be familiar to you if you've been watching the sort of collaborative live streams that we did with Studio Utani. He's one of the players from there. Welcome to the show, Jonesy.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Also known as he stole my name. He stole my name, guys.
As Aaron Matthews, not Aaron. Aaron.
Wait. No, you Aaron? Or I thought you were Aaron.
No, I'm Aaron.
You're Aaron.
You're Aaron?
I'm Aaron, yeah. Okay, so
so there's the distinction.
Yes, it's going to work out.
The audience's mind is now just...
Yeah. And Aaron has been pretty much on all the sessions we've done since Clara introduced us all. So
yeah, most of them.
We're very familiar. We're very familiar with Aaron, even if we weren't sure on the names. But anyway, we're
Jonesy.
Jonesy's an ancestor of a certain feline that survived some certain terrifying encounters.
It was just a harmless ship explosion. Nothing really. That's all conspiracy theories.
Yeah, there was no physical evidence
there
of
wasn't.
the creature that was described anywhere on the shuttle. So,
Do you think Jonesy ever was it Anchor Point that Ripley woke up in?
no, it was
Gateway.
Gateway. Yeah.
Do you think Jonesy just spent the rest of his days there?
Yeah, probably the cat sitter was like, well, I guess she's not coming back.
Yeah.
She ended up going to Earth to live with the cats down there. I think one
The cats just took over.
He had a happy cat ending.
one of the
That's the real Earth War.
I think one of ADF's books had him die due to time dilation or something.
That sounds painful.
I can't remember exactly. That was
I
just
think
an
the
offhand
alien
thing.
universe is complicated enough as it is without adding time dilation into the mix. We'll leave that to Star Trek.
But anyway, we're here to talk about the RPG, the role-playing game. It came out pretty much a year ago as of recording, when it was August 2019. In terms of the was it the beta?
They had a Kickstarter, didn't they?
Ooh, no, there wasn't Kickstarter. It's one of the few things that Free League have done that hasn't been a Kickstarter. I suppose
that was the Protoss game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the AvP one had a...
Didn't they have Tales from the Loop on Kickstarter too? I think was that Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Might have been.
So yeah, it was early access if you pre-ordered it, right, Chris?
It was, but we didn't get much of a early access. We got Chariots of the Gods quite early, but not the full rule book.
Okay.
I think.
And
We got it. Wasn't it about a month in advance?
I thought we had it in nearly a year. I'm sure we had it from about August.
No. The books came out like the month after.
I think it was November that they were officially.
Yeah, I thought
released.
it was last fall. Like I can't remember exactly when it came, but I
It
could have
came
sworn
out
it was last
before the
fall.
public had it.
Yeah.
It did.
Some
Which-
point.
Which is what Free League does with at least seems to be doing with the Alien stuff. So we get early PDF access before the physical books are printed. So
and Free League is a Swedish company, right? They've done a number of their own original RPG series.
Yep.
Is this the first licensed one they've done, or have they done another licensed one?
Well, the Year Zero engine that it's based on is Mutant Year Zero, which is, I believe, a franchise all on its own.
And then there's Tales from the Loop, and I'm not sure where that started. I know there's the Amazon.
That's from an artist called Simon Stellenhag or something.
Oh, so it was from just an art book.
Yeah, it was just lots of paintings, and then it became that, and then now it's a TV series on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I read through the book as prep, but I never thought to actually check up on any of the Free League backstory. But yeah, I mean they're relatively well known Swedish publishers, aren't they?
Have been recently. They've been booming. I mean, I'd never heard of them until Alien, and now you're finding all these games coming out. I mean, they've just kickstarted in the middle of Twilight 2000, which is apparently a really old game. I mean, I don't know how far it goes back, but it's meant to be based on like a World War III thing, and that's adapted into this system now. And so the beauty is they're all based around a similar system. So it's like D&D, I suppose, where everything's based around one system. And now you've got Coriolis, Mutant Year Zero, Tales from the Flood, Things from the Flood, which is the expansion.
It's a whole water
Twilight. God, I haven't forgotten any.
Didn't they do a Cthulhu-based thing?
I think that's an art book from what I've seen. It's just an art book. They do have some. Is it Vassen, which is it Nordic or?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's based on the same system.
Nordic horror role playing, and it is using Year Zero engine.
Right. So do they only use the Year Zero engine, or do they have different?
No. The Symbaroum, which is a fantasy game, uses a polyhedral set, so that's a different engine all again. So polyhedral, if you don't know, is just like a D20, D12, D10, D6, D8, D4.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know.
So all different dice. Whereas the Year Zero engine primarily only uses a D6. Well, multiple D6s.
Unless you're the game mother.
No, just still D6s.
But I thought you used a D66 for the
D66 is just two D6s.
Right. Well, I suppose a fitting place to start then would be for how familiar, not necessarily familiar, how much experience everybody has with role playing as a gaming format. So, Jonesy, you lead us off as the guest.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been into board games and obviously video games, but I've never played any kind of long form role-playing game, even over a single session or multiple sessions. And really, if the Alien RPG hadn't come around, I still probably wouldn't have picked up an RPG. It was only the fact that it's something in this universe that lured me in, and then it's such a great game. So I didn't really have too much experience beforehand.
Okay, Adam?
So I think a lot of my RPG experience was originally from video games. The first RPG I was really into was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
I don't think that counts in terms of this, though, surely.
No. This is at its core a pen and paper table RPG. Although we've been primarily playing it through a website called Roll20, which has a lot of those mechanics integrated in. It's been an awesome way for people at different parts of the world like us to play this together. But yeah, role-playing games of any sort, I have not had too much experience. Again, most of mine came from video games. So this has probably been the first tabletop RPG I've had any degree of real experience in. I've had a number of friends who are into Dungeons and Dragons, and so I kind of had like I guess really, really basic understanding of that just through their interest of it. And I think at its core, this is kind of what this is. This is the Alien Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, 100%. 100%, yeah.
As opposed to like AvP from Protoss, which was like Warhammer 40K, but AvP.
Yeah, well, when it gets down to tabletop gaming, it's far more of a format than just a tabletop gaming. You know, the Prodos thing is miniature war gaming. You know, Legendary Encounters is living card game kind of thing.
Like a deck builder.
A deck building game, yeah. And this is a role-playing game. Just happens to be on a table.
Yeah.
Eric, what about yourself?
Well, I remember back in high school, and I was on like the school newspaper team, although we never actually produced an issue, but we did have this like whole box. It was like the Space Hulk thing out of Warhammer, and we all sort of like crowded around. We had these fantastic little miniatures of Tyranids and Space Marines and things, but we tried to actually play it, but it was kind of hopeless because a lot of the dice and all the rest of it went over our heads. But I loved the miniatures from it, and that was as far as I went back. You know, I got in high school. I was never like Dungeons and Dragons or anything. As time went on, it was like Adam, I got more into role-playing games through like computer games, especially through BioWare computer games. But in terms of like not a game, just the role-playing aspect of it, I was actually doing a lot of games from, I think, around maybe late 90s, certainly early 2000s, right up to the present day of like prose-based role-playing games where it's through the internet, and you each have your own character, and it's like writing a sort of a collaborative fiction sort of thing. You only write for your character, and the other person writes for it, and there's no dice involved, but it's purely as I say, it's like a collaborative novel writing thing. So when I came to this, it was probably my first experience of a role-playing game which didn't have all the mechanics and the dice throwing stuff. That wasn't all hidden behind the scenes. Here, it's a lot more full on, and you use it. And I have to say, before we go on, I was quite impressed by the stress mechanic for this, which did remind me of a computer game which was meant to be a sort of semi-official sequel for The Thing a few years ago, and that included a sort of a paranoia stress-based system in that. Yeah. And I always thought that would be interesting if a future game used that. And it's never really been used in computer games, but it was used in this. And I did find that quite an interesting, rewarding mechanic because it added to the whole chance-based narrative. So yeah, this was probably my first tabletop dice and pen and paper sort of thing. But I'd like, as Adam said, I do find the Roll20 site, the statistics and stuff do go a bit over my head still, but I was really relieved to find out that took a lot of that confusion away. It was done, yeah.
For me, I had played two role-playing game sessions before this, talking specifically this type of game where you are in, around a table, rolling dice, talking as your character. I've always been big into my tabletop games, like the miniatures and the card games and stuff like that. But I could never get into role-playing games because they all tended to be sort of fantasy stuff, and I have no real interest in fantasy. So I tried a session of D&D with you, Chris, if you remember that.
Yeah.
That was
I was new as well.
That was the only time I've ever played D&D, and I did a session of the new Star Trek Adventures role-playing game at one of the local gaming clubs. And that I'm a Trekkie. I grew up a Trekkie, but that didn't really draw me in either. None of those sessions particularly drew me into the platform, into the role-playing game platform. This isn't Alien's first RPG. Leading Edge did a RPG back in the early 90s, yeah.
I remember seeing it at some sort of convention computer show or something that I had to go off at college or something. No, it would have been before that. And I remember seeing it out on the shelves, and I thought, oh, that's going to be interesting. And I never saw it anywhere else. It was like this thing we had to order.
If we ever fancy giving it a go, I've got it.
Got it.
Well, the core rule book has been online for about a decade. So
I was gonna say,
I've had access to it for a long time, but I never gave it a go. I guess primarily because a lot of this sort of stuff does depend on your player group. It depends on having mates who want to join in with you as well.
That's actually very important. It's the people that you play with make and break the game.
Mhm.
Yep, exactly.
So even though it was alien based, I'd still never tried it. But then when this thing came around, there was a lot more buzz about it. You know, about Free League as a publisher, and you know the artwork that accompanied it, the people that were involved in in writing the rules and some of the graphics inside it. You know, Gasker is known. Before coming out with before the book came out, you know, he was known for his involvement in the timeline and the Bible. He's got his own, I think it's Bam Studios, you know, their own comic stuff. He's a novelist as well.
I think it's Blam. Double check.
And the guy who did the vehicle artwork inside it, he's known as well. Simon, I think it is, who worked on the Weyland-Yutani report. I'm just double checking. John, sorry. Simon Mulaney is an actor. John Mulaney did the vehicle artwork inside this. And some of the other illustrations, you know, that came out with the announcement were fantastic. And there was just this big buzz around this. And it meant that there was people interested in playing it. So, yeah, I was going to give it a go.
Yeah, I will say the illustrations just in the rule books and stuff are absolutely exquisite. The artwork that goes along with this.
So the fact that people were interested in playing it, you know, meant I got to experience it. And just, you know, not with it just being aliens, it actually, all the mechanics in it actually working in it and it being a good experience as well, you know, has kept me playing it all this time. I mean, Chris, you
actually for the hype was that when we went to UK Games Expo specifically to play it, all the slots for the weekend ran out within the first 2 or 3 hours of them opening the doors. We were lucky enough to get a slot.
Is
you
that
guys
when
were
you
actually
didn't?
some of the play testers, weren't you? You two?
We play tested the Hadley's Hope scenario, one of the 3 that they did, and one of them which ended up in the core book. But the play tested part came from the early access to Chariots of the Gods and giving feedback.
Was the version of Hadley's Hope similar to what we got in Hope's Last Day, or was it a lot different?
There were 3 different ones. There was one where there was an orchestra, and they're basically playing their bit of the orchestra at one end of the base, and the next minute it's like, where's everyone? Everyone's gone. The second one, I think, was a heist, and they were trying to steal money from the casino because everything was kicking off. They're like, hey, if we're going to lose the planet, I'm going to at least get rich. And the third one was our scenario where we were colonial marshals trying to send a warning using the radar dish, say, hey, planet's screwed, guys, don't come. You know, that's the one that we did. And we held the record there as being one of 2 surviving groups all weekend.
All weekend?
All weekend.
And I knew we were that day.
We were that day, but it was all weekend. We were one of the only 2 survivors. Yeah.
So I actually did a preview article on that experience, which was on the website. You know, I think was that May time, or would that have been a little later? I forget when you. No, it would have been now. It would have been August, wouldn't it?
No, I think it was UK. Is it UK Games Expo June?
I don't know. It was summertime. I remember it being sweaty.
As are most events.
Yes. So my experience was 2 sessions, and that was it. Now, Mr. Chris, you are the most experienced. Please provide us with your backstory in RPG. Okay,
so I mean, my experience only really extends back maybe 3 or 4 years. So I started primarily playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Still play it to this day. But I always I'm always the dungeon master or the game mother in this case, because that's what the person who runs the game behind the scenes is called, which I love. It's thematic. It's perfect. I know there was some moaning saying, "Oh, we're calling each other mother now." Well, if it bothers you that much, call yourself father. Whatever. Doesn't bother me.
I didn't see any moaning.
That's
Did
awesome.
people kick up a fuss about that?
A little bit. It was minor. It was minor.
I think it's very dramatic.
As a player, I suppose you guys have got more experience than I have. But running the game, I suppose I have more experience than what any of you have. So we've got some very different perspectives.
Okay.
How many times have you played it as a player, Chris?
Alien?
Yeah,
Twice.
the Alien RPG.
How many sessions have you GM'd?
I don't know.
Probably at least a dozen, wasn't it?
Too many to count
I
individually.
I honestly don't know. I mean,
I was DMing.
I was DMing Dungeons and Dragons once a week for 2 years for my first campaign for Dungeons and Dragons. So that's 104, nearly. Because I think we had a couple of weeks off around Christmas. And then obviously with this one, I've been doing different groups for different people with Chariots, trying to introduce new people like Eric and Calum. I've been around them through Chariots again. I don't know. I have just so many now.
And Chris, just to segue into like a general role-playing question. So you just mentioned how many sessions of Dungeon, like 100 and something. Is that one continuing storyline, or is that?
Yeah, that's one continuous storyline.
That's crazy.
And that's what we haven't got into in the Alien RPG. You have your cinematic scenarios, which is kind of meant to be played in one session. We've gone as long as 5-6 hours, but usually it's about 2 to 3 hours you can get through it. And then you have your campaign play, which is meant to be multiple extended sessions, and you typically have a higher chance of surviving through that.
Actually, that's not true. The aliens.
Well, that's what the book says.
Just as easily as they can in cinematic mode. The idea is that you wouldn't introduce aliens into it until it's like, oh crap, we're at the end of the game. Here are the aliens.
And to be fair, I think we always tended to play the game a little more aggressively than the designers intended us to play the game. So
yeah, you do.
And you've been dying as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one part I noticed in the book that said, like, if you betray the group, you become an NPC.
We always did that. We always did that.
Oh, really? Because
Yeah, it's because we normally ended up dying as a consequence.
Yeah.
But I'm talking more in terms of like the book tries to tell you to play it in an isolation kind of fashion, where when the alien shows up, hide, evade, don't go shoot the thing.
Which is why I try to get you to hide when the alien comes out, and I do random patrol paths with dice. But unfortunately, you guys suck at rolling dice.
Yeah.
We did that, and my character just knocked over a fire extinguisher. And
yeah,
but, I mean, it's been interesting because here's the thing that Chris is a good game moderator. Like there was that whole thing with me and Aaron characters, and we had that thing where the alien grabbed my character, but then it incapacitated my character, but then it just dropped them to the floor, and it didn't attack anymore. And it made me think, because it was like you had it sort of toying, but it was like using my character as bait to lure yours in. So there's always ways and means of playing around with the different situations that the dice hand us. It makes for a very rewarding, but certainly very creative, because you do have to think outside the box with this game, I've found.
You do.
And just to point on to that, like so the first scenario was Hope's Last Day, the first of publicly released one. Hope's Last Day.
No, that
was Destroyer of World.
Yeah. So
Chariots was first.
So we got Chariots as a PDF before the books were released, and then because that was originally supposed to be in the core book, and then they swapped it around to add Hope's Last Day.
So Hope's Last Day is basically the third act in a cinematic campaign. So that's a fantastic way of saying, right, you new players, crack on, it's all action, good luck surviving. With
So-
Chariots of the Gods, it's a full 3-act thing.
But I mean, I've played both of those probably 6-7 times now, and no two experiences have been the same. I think that's just such
They've
a
been
good deal,
totally
but,
different. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
replayability value.
definitely.
Definitely.
Just off the 2 scenarios alone. I mean, so like Adam, I think, mentioned, we have all primarily been playing the cinematic scenarios. So before we go any further, let's just sort of explain the difference in formats. So, Chris, give us a breakdown on sort of how that works and how that compares to your D&D.
So what you mean, like cinematic versus campaign?
Yes.
So a cinematic, like I just said, is basically meant to be done in 3 parts. It's meant to be they're one-off characters that the GM makes, and it's a case of like, these are your personal agendas to try and achieve, and you get agendas in each act, so you get 3 agendas.
So it's structured like a film, just to point that out, with the 3-act structure. You know, cinematic is like it says in the name in terms of emulating the structure of an alien film.
Yeah. So we might say that Hicks, your mission here is to go and investigate what's happening, find some research data. Then you could have Jonesy, who's like, he's in here looking for medication, because that seems to be one of the things that seems to be in the game, is that they're always after some kind of drugs. Don't know why. RidgeTop's character might be after some hard cash, trying to make a quick buck somewhere, and Xenomorphine's character might be, say, he's looking for a threat. He just wants a fight. So you've got to try and think through that first act, like how are you going to try and achieve these agendas? But they're not necessarily important. You can ignore them. So, for example, like if it's too risky, you want your character to live, you're not going to do it. It's that kind of thing. Crikey, that's loud. Can't hear that. Can you?
At the same time, I just want to interject here. I think one of the pitfalls I was having early on was I was attempting to play the game as kind of unknowingly as someone who knew about the aliens and the threat that they posed. And it says specifically in the book, like, you want to move the story forward. Like, you don't want your character to die, but at the same time, you can be too careful and too concerned about staying alive and not taking any risks, and then the story can just kind of stagnate. And I think I did that a bit early on. I was just like, well, let's just set up a defensive position here until this thing happens that we need to happen. And you do kind of want to incentivize exploration and progression in the story.
I must say that it didn't work well for you, though, did it?
Well, I think I ended up just going along with the group when you're like, come on, let's just go.
I think Adam does bring up a good point, though. It is kind of hard to separate that mindset, knowing what we know about this series.
It's a huge hurdle.
Yeah,
it's a huge hurdle.
But then again, that's why, you know, like when so Chris, we've mentioned the 2 official as cinematic ones that we've played, but Chris has also done his own homebrew, his own custom one. And one of the things that the core book sort of gives you as an inlet, as a way to sort of perhaps your characters know about things, is it references the Book of Morse, which is Space Beast, and also things like the room, and things like rumors and stuff. So the core book itself, as a blueprint, as a source of inspiration, does give you a lot of things, and Space Beast is at least a way to work around that when you're playing with a group of unknowns who might not necessarily be active in the alien story as such.
In fact,
it's a nice way for like newer players, if they're struggling getting out of that mindset. You can go, well, at least you know about it, so you can play on it. It's not character breaking.
Wasn't one of our characters in your last homebrew? Didn't they carry a copy of Space Beast? Or they were definitely. I know we definitely referenced it a good bunch.
Yeah.
Times, yeah.
It was Alana Reed's book that she was reading. She was reading all about Space Beast. So it was like, hey, wait a minute.
Alana and Elliot.
So the difference from then with cinematic is basically meant to be it's short, but we've never had a short cinematic experience yet. They've always gone on for like hours and hours. The short and the brutal, good luck surviving. It's the Dark Souls of Alien RPG. Good luck.
I mean,
Whereas the campaign.
Go on.
So the campaign is meant to be. It's more of a storytelling version of the game. So like D&D, the idea is to go multiple sessions and tell a story. But the players in this are just as fragile as they are in the cinematic. So I'm not too sure.
Well, it just mentioned that in the
work.
book. It said something like your character has better odds of survival in campaign play or something like that. And I think the key differing factor is you're creating your own character in campaign play as opposed to having one assigned to you in cinematic play. And so you can decide what kind of attributes they have, what kind of career and background they come from. So I think there's definitely a lot more narrative control. And again, this is going to be highly dependent on the group you play with. You want to tell a story together, and you don't have control of every outcome, but you have a lot more control of what you do in the story. Like, oh, we're going to go to this planet and this colony and we'll do this trade or whatever. So there's a lot more involvement in terms of storytelling, and like you're all telling your group's story as opposed to going through a story that's been prepared for you.
Yeah. And it's like you've gone to, let's say that you're a group of like mercenaries, you're guns for hire. You could go to a station and I could say, well, you've got 5 different contracts to choose from. But you don't have to choose any of them 5. You can go somewhere else, do something else. Whereas a cinematic mode is, here are the tracks, you're on them. There are some different routes, but not many. They all lead. They all lead to the same.
See, there is a lot of support for random generation of stuff in the campaign, from what I've seen. So in the GM section of the book, it's roll a dice and you pick these, and you can create entirely random situations from it. I think the difficult thing is going to be trying to create a longer story that doesn't necessarily throw the aliens at you every time, but still feels alien related.
That's right.
But the book does give a lot of
world building.
The core book essentially is half mechanic, half lore / world building. So it gives you. I mean, as the book points out, there is more to the alien universe than the beasties, and it's about crafting other stories around those things, about political intrigue and corporate nastiness and stuff like that. And the book gives you a lot of these other corporations that you can explore. There's engineer ruins.
Way back into like you look back onto the original Alien. Do you remember all the little flag emblems and stuff on the Nostrum crate? And it talks about the 3-world empire. You can bring that stuff into it, which has never actually been explored in the films. It's not all about derelicts and stuff. And even when it comes to wildlife, you can bring in all these other things, and you can. I think the book even says you can make stuff up on your own if you want to, and it's got stuff to do. It gives you the flavor of the Alien continuity, but you don't have to introduce facehuggers or anything at all. You can just have a crew that's a research crew, and they find engineer technology, but then it goes off into a completely different path, and it's something else is afoot or whatever. But it always makes you feel like you are in the world of Alien, and that's what I really like about this lore background, because it almost reads, if you take away the statistics and stuff, it almost does read as like a writer's guide. You could give this to someone who's writing an Alien novel, and if they've read it all the way through, they would have pretty much all the basics they need to be able to soak the reader into that Alien flavor. But in terms of the longevity of these sessions, I would say that's the difference between playing something like this now compared to when we said about the earlier 1990s game when that came out. Because back then you would have had to get people physically around to your house or something. Like in Stranger Things now, that you've had Dungeons and Dragons give a little boost in popularity because that's referenced in things like that. And back in those days, you had to physically get people around, whereas now, we're now doing it with basically video conferencing technology. And as long as you can schedule when everyone's free to do it, you can have a game with someone who's in America or Australia or whatever. You don't have to physically know people who are into it, which was the big hurdling, that stumbling block to getting the popularity of these things back then, whereas with now we not only have the lore and that to make up these other scenarios that are stepping stones and they can sort of cross over into all these other worlds, but you can, if you need people, it's relatively easy if you want to put the time to go to a forum and saying, hey, does anyone have a copy of this? Yeah, it'll put on Skype or Zoom or whatever, and as long as someone can play the moderator, you're away. That wasn't possible back in the 1990s days, but now we've got this plus this sort of bridging stuff where you have a lot of, even if you weren't into the prequels as films, they give you a really nice sort of substance heavy things that if you were given these toys in the sandbox, what would you do? And you can just bounce ideas off one another if you want to come up with a scenario. You don't have to rely on the books. In terms like the rule books and stuff, you can make your own stuff in like Chris has done. So
yeah, I mean, I've got to
it's
admit, the
lot
prequel
more-
stuff is hella fun to play with
yeah,
as a GM.
Yeah,
Hella
because
fun.
it's
your own sandbox. You can play, and if you've got criticisms of the films, like they didn't do this or they did too much of that, you can literally have at it and say, well, how would you have done it? And literally make a better tea cake.
Do we think if Ridley Scott was GMing his own homebrew, do you think it would feature aliens at all, or just
I think
AI?
he'd be like, I don't know what this shit is.
Dice. I don't roll
you
dice.
you
You're all
nerds
dead.
have at it.
it'd just be androids. Everybody'd be androids.
Yeah.
But I think
Hey, it's a choice. You can do it if you want.
D&D is popular right now, and you bring up a good point, Eric. I think things like Stranger Things and really just geek
There's
culture.
a resurgence.
Yeah, but really just geek culture and escapism in general is much more hot right now than it was when we were growing up. It's much more mainstream. So I think
It's
game
not as much of a niche now.
Yeah. I think this game came out at the right time, and just the format of it, the presentation of it, I think this could become a big staple of fandom. And I think it could hopefully keep going for years to come with new expansions. I really hope it doesn't suffer the same licensing fate as the Protoss AvP game did. I don't think it will. Because it does seem to have connected with the fan base. We've seen a number of different community groups playing this online and posting their playthrough videos, like Studio Yutani, among others. So, yeah, I've honestly just been really impressed with it as someone who's completely new to RPGs, and I think a lot of people who are new to RPGs and don't have a lot of experience with this, but they are into sci-fi or the alien universe, will be able to get in this. And someone like you, Chris, who has a bit more experience, will be able to guide them and help them become more aware of what they can do and how a story plays out. And it's been super engaging. And I really love it, to be honest.
Just to piggyback on what Adam's saying, in terms of finding people, I think it's the Alien RPG on Discord. I mean, you'll see a couple of different sessions posted each week. If you want to jump in with people that you don't know, that place has hundreds and hundreds of members. So there's always the opportunity to jump in and find a game to play with people.
And there's a group on Facebook as well. Free League has their own boards. I mean, we tried to put a group together on AvP Galaxy and just sort of got sort of merged in with the group Studio Yutani had established as well. And there's just, I think we're at the point now where we've got too many players in our group for the normal. Yeah. So it's definitely. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, luckily, isn't the their latest
Yeah.
piece, Destroyer of Worlds, doesn't that have a few more characters?
It does have 7 playable characters, but it's still meant for 5. The idea being that 2 are meant to stay on the APC and they're respawns.
Yeah.
So we're at max numbers for the next.
Yeah, I mean that
next-
is important to point out to people who are unfamiliar with this. It's not a case where you can be playing a game that lasts for however many days, and if you die early on, oh well, sod off, you can't play it anymore. You simply take on another character that's an NPC, and you are still in the game. You're just doing another character.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, that's nice. Well, the only problem comes in terms of if they all die.
The problem is, in this new one, is that you're playing all the playable characters. So when someone dies, you don't have another one.
Right.
Isn't this
It's
game
a bit
supposed
of
to
a
be a
problem
little?
we've got.
Isn't it supposed to be a little bit longer? This one?
Yeah. I think the effect guys clocked it at 21 hours, and they reckon with stuff that's been added to it, you're looking at 22 to 30 now.
You're talking about Destroyer of Worlds.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
what
that
would
would still be. I was
Sorry,
going to
go
say,
ahead,
would that
Jonathan.
still be classified as cinematic? Or I mean,
Yeah, because it's still you've still got your 3 acts, and it's still from point A to B to C. It's you're telling a story, but it's meant to be. Those characters don't go any further than Act 3.
And probably what you do in that instance is just have one session be one act if you could manage it.
Oh,
Try.
not if it's
It's
not
not
if it's
enough this
30
time.
hours. Yeah, not if it's 30 hours.
The other thing that I do want to add, though, for if you're trying to find a group and it's your first time and you're in a group and it just doesn't gel well, don't give up. Try and find a different set of people, because the people you play with really matters.
Yeah.
It really, really matters. So don't give up. Keep trying.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree with that completely.
And honestly, even if you don't see yourself getting too into the game, the core rulebook has a lot of just Alien Universe lore in it. That if you want to just dive into that and learn more about the Alien Universe, there's a lot of good information there as well. Even if you don't find yourself hopping into game sessions, it's just a cool book to have on your shelf.
You see, that's why I really liked it as sort of talking as it being a toolbox for assembling campaign play in ways to keep it feeling alien, but without necessarily including the alien. There's a lot of deep lore in here that retain that alien feel. You know, for me, the Union of Progressive Peoples was always a piece of deep lore that I was always really excited about. So, you know, when Aliens Infestation came out, I got a huge kick out of them being involved in that. So you can use them as human adversaries in this. Bionational from the very first Aliens series are in this. There's references to the Kenner figures and the comics that came with those. You know, the hover tread vehicles referenced.
And it's not always just characters going on foot. There are whole mechanics we haven't even explored yet for things like orbital combat and piloting skills and stuff. We haven't even delved into any of that, but they're already there, ready to be used.
Which I think is what the next campaign, the next scenario is pushing. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, I think you're going to be either flying around or driving around a massive colony. So
the lore
hopefully there'll be some APC combat in there somewhere. Hopefully.
Yeah. The lore in the core rulebook is very expansive, and it's really encompassing of a lot of different areas of the Alien universe that I wouldn't have thought they would have put together. Like if the stories that wouldn't really work together in the lore, like they have the wooden planet from Alien 3, they have Anchor Point from Gibson's script, and they also have
it's a second anchor point, though it's not the anchor point.
Gotcha. But I mean, they're taking locations from alternate versions of the films that weren't canon, so it's like at some point it's like they're just throwing in the whole kitchen sink here with all these different parts of the Alien universe, and like, do they all work together? Do they all fit together? But I think you can take locations that were part of stories, but the stories themselves were not considered part of it.
Yeah,
there's a very interesting that Drew, who wrote it, has a very interesting sort of mentality around things like that I think is really interesting. And he talks about it as like a barroom story kind of thing, whereas perhaps the locations were real, but the exact scenario that took place there is just barroom rumor. So, perhaps Gibson's or Ward's Alien 3, is just a barroom story, and that the planet genuinely exists, which is what the planet does exist as far as the RPG is concerned. And there's all sorts of random places. The Scorpion alien, everybody always sort of knew that as the old Kenner's best one. The planet that's from is in the rulebook, and their Scorpion host, Colonial Marines, the comic, one of the planets and the company from that's in there. All sorts of just random ass things. Although Rim's not in it yet. I hope he brings Rim into it at some point.
It's basically it's like a collection of spices. You don't have. It's not like all quotes canon. It's just like if you want such and such and such and such, you want to add them together for your story.
Yeah.
They're there. You can take and leave what you want. It's just nice to have options.
It's a really big toolkit for what you want to do. Like they have weaponry from Aliens, Colonial Marines, Alien Isolation, but that doesn't necessarily mean Hicks is alive in the universe. So it's just a lot of things at your disposal from all different creative works in the franchise, and it really puts them together in a way that feels cohesive, I think. Even if it's like a bit overwhelming, it's like, whoa, the Alien universe is a lot bigger and more complex than I realized, with all these different factions and governments and things like that.
I mean, I can attest to that. Is that as the DM, or the mother in this case, I went into this game thinking, don't need none of the lore stuff. I know enough. And that's true. For the most part, I can get by on what I know. But there is more stuff in this book that I didn't know. As a fan, it's like, all right, it's a bit overwhelming, actually. There's loads of stuff.
You've got your own
no
Wikipedia,
interest,
basically.
Yeah, if you have no interest in playing this game whatsoever, it's still such a recommend because of the lore and what you'll learn about the universe. What did you guys think of the engineer lore and the space jockey stuff within this?
Well, he leaves it, a lot of it sort of, in general, things in the book tend to be a bit, here's some ideas, do what you will with them. So like the book acknowledges the theory that perhaps the engineers aren't the space jockeys and stuff like that, and it just gives you bullet points to potentially do things with. And with the universe being what it is at the minute, in terms of uncertainty about knowing where Scott's going to go with the lore,
It's
it kind
fluid.
I think stuff like this tends to avoid going definitive on anything
It
like
doesn't
that.
paint itself into a corner, which is the problem these things can have.
But even just seeing that fan theory that perhaps the engineers are emulating the space jockeys, I was like, yeah.
So do you see enough content in the lore regarding space jockey for a GM to then create their own story based around their own homebrew based around the engineer lore?
Yeah,
you absolutely could. But the problem would be if you ever encountered one, there are no stats.
But that's the thing.
You'd have to make that yourself.
Yeah, people do make their own stats up. I mean, people like try and homebrew the predators into the.
I was just going to mention that.
I've done that.
So that was one thing I wanted to bring up since you mentioned predators. You guys know I'm an AvP fan. There are a couple instances in this book that reference AvP locations. There's, like you told me, Aaron, there's the Chingusa Corporation, which I didn't initially spot, which is from the first AvP comic. But from Rebellion's original game, there is also the station shown on the star chart, which is orbiting LV-426. So that kind of makes me wonder if they ever would do a Predator expansion. I think it'd be awesome. I know some fans, maybe among yourselves as well, would be like, nah, keep it Alien, come on. But I think a Predator expansion would be super cool to add. And I know you would have to kind of not mention the AvP movies, I guess, just because of the lore inconsistencies, but they've already done that with the comics, like Life and Death and Fire and Stone follow the Prometheus storylines, even though with Covenant, I don't know if that still works anymore, but I think you could do it in a way where the Predators are just there. Here's their culture. Here's their background. and you can have like a group of predators or whatnot.
Yeah, because it's
and,
just
and
an
role
option.
play as them.
It's an expansion. Nothing has to all be 100% used. It's just what the GM decides to put in it. So if they, I'm sure it's just purely a licensing issue. I'm sure they'd love to do Predator stuff.
It is. Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed at all.
Yeah, if you could have it as an expansion, you're not forced to use it. If someone just wants to make a pure Alien game, they can. Just like someone would be able to make a pure Predator game. But it would be there if someone wanted to use it.
I mean, how cool would it be to have you all be predators and then using the stats as the aliens?
Or, as I understand it, they try to do a game where the players were all aliens as well.
That's Effect podcast.
Yeah,
that's nothing official.
No, but I mean, it's been toyed with. Yeah,
it's been done.
So the greatest thing really is you've got to consider this a toolbox. They hand you mechanics, they hand you some existing stuff. Here's a bit of lore. Go fucking nuts, and that's what's brilliant about it. I mean, you can just do what you want with the mechanics in here. You want to custom brew your own. I always joke with Drew about the VP70 not being in it. Which is the pistol from Aliens. If I wanted to, I could go and make my own stats. Yeah, I do want my Veep. Drew, if you're listening, I want my Veep in the Colonial Marines expansion.
If someone wanted to, they could make up a Herc Mondo Rick and Morty crossover. And there's nothing to say you couldn't, as long as you've got the statistics to play in there. You can make a parody game if you want to. There's nothing stopping someone from doing it. They just got to put in the time to make up the background things to make it work. As long as you can do that, you just go for it.
Speaking of the mechanics, then, do you, as new players and fans of the Alien universe, I guess as well here, do you think the mechanics are easy to pick up and the game is easy to get into? And do you think those mechanics work within the Alien universe? So, Jonesy, you go first, mate.
I think for me, this being my first real RPG, it wasn't really so much the mechanics. It was just the process of knowing what to say and just the general actions of everyone and who takes turns where and when. But in terms of the actual mechanics of the game, the dice, the stress rolls, the panics, I feel like that's pretty easy to pick up. I personally, when I got the core book, I read it in like 2 days, and I read it too quickly because it just went over my head. It definitely helps if you start off with a GM who knows what they're doing. So Chris, for example, is great at GMing. My first game, I played with someone who it was their first time GMing, and it kind of, everyone was confused and crazy, but I think it's pretty easy to pick up pretty quickly, and I don't think I'd be comfortable GMing myself just yet, but I don't think it does a bad job at showing you like the strings from the start.
Okay. How about you, Eric? How easily did you pick it up, especially considering you came into this a lot later than the rest of us have been playing?
You played two or three sessions now, Eric?
In terms of whole missions, I think it's just been 2, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they were over several days.
2 scenarios.
Yeah. I will say the actual lore book, as someone who's like, I'm one of the older generations of the fans, and there's some bits have issues with canon-wise, but in terms of digesting it, I got through that. For me, it was there's still a lot of the statistics and how things work and the background stuff that still goes over my head. I think for me, it's still going to be like that several months down the line. I think for me, even though like the Roll20 game site where we do this through, it takes a lot of that effort out. So I don't know if I'd find it easier or not if we weren't doing that and we were all just throwing the actual physical dice. I don't know. I can just say that I still find the actual playing side of it, when you have to do like a chance throw or whatever, that's still confusing as to how the mechanics work. But I do think the stress mechanic is a really interesting and useful device. And I really like how you could, like, you're just told, right, this is the situation, your characters are here, and then you roll with it and you say, right, I'm going to blah, 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 or I'll talk to a character and blah, blah. And it's completely up to you. It's not like in a computer game where you only have the control. You can say, well, okay, there's a ship there. I don't want to dock our ship to it. How about, and this was a thing I came up with in the last session, how about we use the cargo mule thing as a shuttle to go over? We could do that because it's a tool and it gives you, you're obviously expected to go down a certain path, but what if you don't? It gives you this way of thinking outside the box because it is purely person-to-person role-playing. And I find that really rewarding to get through. That, I think, it does it really well. It will depend completely on who the GM is, because the GM needs to be able to take account of things and figure out, well, my plan is secretly to do this
feel
and
bad
that.
being here almost like
No, it's good. You've been able to. There have been once we joke about it, but I think my first session, we had this thing where Adam's character was, I think they're a scientist or a technician, and he could only do one move. So one of the moves was he was looking at an alien through a window, and he decided to do the "How does it work?" And Chris was like, I don't know, and it sort of broke the game because the GM wasn't sure how the hell to interpret that. But I mean, there are ways and means of doing it. So there will be moments where like that. Most of all, it's not scary. It actually kind of like makes you laugh as you're going along. But yeah, in terms of the actual mechanics, I think it does take. You need at least the GM to be familiar with it, so they can sort of like handhold you through some of it.
Have you been learning on the fly, or have you actually got around to reading like through some of the rules?
Both. I mean, I've been putting the time in trying to read, but there's because it's because it's so involved. It's not one of these things where it's a mile wide and an inch deep. It's deep if you want to get into it, because it's rich enough to go off and do whatever you want. So I would say it as a beginner. For me, I still do find the mechanics a bit confusing, but if you're with the right people, you can be completely new and you can go into it. You're not going to fall on your feet as long as there's someone who knows what they're doing. So again, it's about getting with the right group of people more than anything. You can be a complete beginner and you can get more and more used to it. But if you're all beginners, yeah, you're going to need to do some video tutorials or something. Yeah, you can't just go, okay, let's do this, whatever the fuck. It's not going to work like that. You're going to have experience.
I'll hold my hands up. I still get things wrong. So, yeah.
But more often
not
than not,
great.
I mean, you're able. This is the thing that I like about it. It lets you improvise, and it lets the GM improvise.
It's true.
And there's some things where on our games, unbeknownst to us as characters, Chris had a group of characters, and apparently they were all infected, and he was constantly doing these rolls of dice behind the scenes we weren't aware of, and it was just to see, would someone hatch? And we had no idea. From our point of view as characters and players, we thought, well, some of these might be infected. And we sort of like wasted a lot of time trying to do this detective game that we didn't need to do. But when we found out that, we were like, oh, so it could have all gone that way. It added this whole layer, just knowing that things can kick off without you knowing that. It's like it gives you those contingencies in a way that you're not necessarily expecting there to be.
I think another example of that was Chris's last time brew, where what was the synth's name? And he at the start, I think you did a
James.
Did a private dice roll to determine if he was going to be a good synth or a bad synth.
Yeah. And that's completely choice. It could have been 50-50. He would have helped you, and 50-50 would have helped you. It's not a linear thing. Yeah.
What about you, Adam, in terms of coming to this as a new player then?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was thanks to your GMing as well, Chris. Is I felt like I could get into this. It did take a minute to learn some of the mechanics and everything I could do in terms of how that affects the order of turns. Like Overwatch took me a second to understand, but it's not a super high learning curve, to be honest. Even someone like me coming from RPG video games, like I knew different things like attributes and skill points and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff is kind of goes between RPGs of both gaming and tabletop. Now, a lot of the tabletop ones can be a lot more complex with that. But in terms of the actual mechanics of this game, it doesn't seem overly complex. Like, I think the tabletop war games are a lot more complex, because I remember some of the rule books of like Warhammer are just absurd. They're just super large. But in terms of the mechanics of this game, it's not. There's not a real barrier for entry, I think. I think if you read through it and you play a few games, you'll get the hang of it fairly quickly.
I think if you've played an XCOM game, you're at least half the way there already, basically.
I like tabletop games, even if I don't necessarily didn't come into this really doing role-playing games. For me, the initial struggle was the role-playing aspect of the game, because despite I mean, I'm not in general an outgoing person. You know, I'm not the type of person that would go to drama club or do stuff like that. And I struggled a little bit with that when we did the demo at UK Games Expo, Chris. I struggled getting into that part of it. But you get there eventually. And again, that again comes down to playing with a good group of folk who you get on with. Because like somehow every single scenario that we play, me and Adam end up being on opposite sides of of the table in terms of, you know, being foes with each other, and that always makes it kind of fun and kind of interesting, and the game situations make this you know, make what's happening take awkward turns and stuff like that as well, which is fun. So for me, it was getting comfortable with that aspect of it. Mechanics wise, I will always want to reread rules anyway, just to get a better understanding of things. But I didn't think it massively complex. It's just a case of knowing what's in there and what the actions do and stuff like that. The panic dice are where I think this game does really well in terms of fitting in to the feel of the Alien universe. So I think the panic dice are part of the engine anyway, aren't they, Chris? Aren't these from some of their other Free League's other games?
They are, but they're used very differently in the different games. I don't know how they're used. I have got the Coriolis book upstairs, so I could compare, but I haven't read it yet. But I don't know.
Fair enough. Well, in this, you are given specific dice known as stress dice that you get for turning on a monitor and seeing the aftermath of an alien massacre and various traumatic events like that. But it's interesting because they then add to your potential success at things. But those specific dice also have their ones on one of those dice trigger a negative thing. So while the chances of succeeding are higher, this is all them stats that Eric doesn't like. While the odds of succeeding are higher, there's also then the chance that you could cause a bad thing to happen. And that kind of, it sounds kind of rubbish.
It's high risk, high reward.
Yeah. It doesn't sound so exciting when I'm explaining it on a mechanical level like that. But then when it comes to you are being in a game, you have a decision to make. Do I roll and potentially cause shit to go awry or not, you know? And sometimes it does. We've had some really interesting
to negate stress as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there are management stuff in there, so it doesn't get out of hand as often. It can still get out of hand, which I think was, Chris, that's probably been the most difficult thing in terms of the game, isn't it? Is managing those snowballing stress.
For learning how to use it, yeah. If you pile on the stress early on, you can get this unwieldy snowball effect where everyone is basically just running around and the game's on fire. It can get really out of hand. So as a GM, you need to get to a point where you draw a line and go, right, you've done your stress rolls. Let's try and bring it back in a bit. I think that the stress mechanic is actually one of the more interesting parts of the game, but it is one of the parts of the game that breaks it if you're not careful. Because if your players have too much stress, it can just totally break any playability.
But the rules also, the core book also makes it very forgetting my English here. It tells you that your discretion is, as the GM, is more important ultimately than anything else. So as the GM, you do have that ability to go, fuck the rules at this point. We're doing this for the sake of the experience. And I don't know how necessarily flexible all the other role-playing games
super important. No, rule books are always guidelines. It's up to the GM to make the final call every time. They're just guidelines.
I as the only one here who's done the GMing, I wanted to ask you your sort of perspective and experience in handling this from that GM side, and compared to perhaps your experience with those other games as well.
What regards to what? Sorry.
In terms of GMing, so
just in terms of GMing. So like between this and D&D, really for me, I think they're very, very different. In D&D, you're more heroes, you're very hard to kill, you're fighting dragons and stuff. And in Alien, if you're fighting an alien and I roll a 6, and you'll see my face when I roll a 6 because it's like, oh no, someone's dead. Because then it'll say, hey, now you've rolled a 6, roll 8 8d6s. And if I get any 6 on that person is dead. It is brutal. This is like I've said before, it's like the Dark Souls of RPGs.
But I mean, I as an Alien film fan, I liked it because one of the worries when I heard about this game, I thought, well, is it going to be like Colonial Marines where you shoot them with like a pistol and they die?
Oh, no.
These aliens, they are hardy and they are. They act like you would expect. It's not impossible to kill them because at one situation we heard one going through an air duct, and I was in charge of the group, and I said, right, get back to put your backs against the walls and all go into Overwatch, and we managed to kill it as it got out the vent. But
yeah, that's right.
But that was lucky. These things, they are not impossible, but they are you can just have one or two of them on a map and they will be a formidable threat. You will need to keep in mind you are the vulnerable one. I
must admit, getting the aliens right in this game was so important. And when we did that game at the UK Games Expo, Hicks, where we set an explosive charge at a door, and then we all hid around the corner with rifles, it went through the explosive charge, blew up, and the DM at the time rolled all these dice. He's like, right. And then he explained it bouncing around the corner, and it was smoky, and there was blood pouring from it. And then we opened up on it, and then it's like, right, rolled another dice, and it retreated. And we're like, it's still alive. That is how hard the aliens are in this game. They are tough. They're not cannon fodder. But back to the rules.
That's a good way of describing it.
You have a couple ways to get by the skin of your teeth, though. Like you can still do a death roll and critical injuries as long as someone gives you medical aid. You can. That's right. You can get back to your feet.
But as for rules, I would call this game quite rules light. Like for D&D, you've got 3 books. You've got the Player's Handbook, which is about the thickness of the Alien RPG. You've got the DM's Guide, which is about the thickness of the Alien RPG, and you've got the Monster Manual, again about the thickness of the Alien RPG. Yeah, so you're looking at a book like that for D&D and a book like that for the Alien RPG. So it is very rules light. I think there's about 80 pages worth of core rules out of nearly 400 pages. Like I said, a lot of it is full of lore. I think it's quite easy to run, assuming you can wrap your head around it as someone who's had a bit of experience. Like I said, I'm not vastly experienced, and yet I've managed to make it at least fun for you all. So I do like how it is pick up and play. I find it pick up and play anyway. I don't know what else to really say about it.
That's the thing. You've got to really compare it to, because like from my perspective, I got nothing to compare it to aside from the computer games like Total War and stuff, which it's all taken care of behind the scenes. For you're able to compare it to other RPGs out there, so you've got the benefit of saying compared to typical tabletop RPGs, it's a lot more accessible. Whereas for me, I'm just taking it as an experience.
That's right. I mean, for example, in D&D, for how vast that is, like somebody at my table could say, "Oh, I'm going to cast such and such a spell at this level," and I'm like, "Right, what's that do?" Because I haven't ever heard of it. You know what I mean? It's like, and they've got to then go to the bit of text and they've got to read out the text so I can make like a ruling on it. Where in this game, it's like, right, I'm going to make a ranged attack with my pulse rifle. So I'm like, right, so that deals X amount of damage, X amount of bonus dice to your attack, and it's at this range. Oh, it's so simple.
Is that not just not to take away from it, but could that also be a benefit of age as well? You know, we're coming into this game at the start of its life.
Maybe. See, D&D is such an old. It's a very vast game. Even 5th edition, it's so vast, so vast. I think maybe you're right.
Comparing that 1st edition to where it is today to see how much more has been added on.
Yeah. I mean, because wasn't there some kind of message saying we were going to get like a Colonial Marines?
I think we do with some sort of Colonial Marines core book, yeah.
So that's going to add a whole other layer then.
Because I mean, you look at the history. You did have Dungeons and Dragons, and I think the next really major pop culture thing that came in was probably Vampire the Masquerade, and they had a similar lot of like this expansion, that expansion. They had a whole thing for werewolves and blah blah blah, and then they sort of like rebooted it all. And I mean, these days you've got things like the YouTube channel Critical Role with Laura Bailey and that, and you just shows them having fun with it. And I think something like this, you've had not just years, but decades of people who have grown up with Dungeons and Dragons, and they're just they can now simplify things. And there is going to always be a degree of complexity, but now it's something like the Alien RPG. It's polished with a horror genre veneer, but they're able to polish, and because they've probably played these other games in the past, and they've thought, Christ, we don't need to do all these 20 pages of look, just make it a pulse rifle. And it's probably that kind of, they've just simplified it down. It's still a little imposing when you're just given this big thick book and all this. They need to release just an art book from all this art. They seriously do.
Definitely.
But
I mean,
it's
still
for a new player, yeah, but
kind of, it's intimidating.
Yeah, it looks like an actual atlas, but
then
is
again,
from a benefit of all those years of experience of people who have played these older games.
Remember that they've also put out the new starter set, which is essentially just the mechanics, and we don't have them in hand yet because I don't think they're shipping until the end of this month as of recording. But that'll probably be like that much.
I think it'll be softback as well.
Yeah,
so hardly many pages.
As intimidating as this looks, a good chunk of it really is lore and world building.
Yeah, you don't need it. It's just you probably take this, that, and that out of it, and then what you're actually using for the game is only like 7-10 pages maybe, and that's just the stuff that like you've got a cheat sheet or something. The stuff
it's about half of it from the looks of it.
I mean, I only read about ship-to-ship combat the other day.
Yeah.
If I don't need it, you don't need to read it.
No,
right? Yeah.
But you did. I do remember, Chris. Whenever we do a game, I will say one of the flaws in this you found is that for some reason they put all the stuff you need. You're going from the back to the front to the back to the front. It's not organized in the most intuitive of ways.
But I will say that has been a pain, even in D&D. That is a pain with sometimes how it's just laid out.
Yeah. It's better to have like the PDF.
I was going to say, I always have the PDF open and I just search it if I need to. It's an easier way to go around it.
Yeah, fortunately, this group has got some awesome searches, so we can always get to rules quickly whenever needed.
Again,
So,
it's another advantage of being in this day as opposed to like the 1980s or something.
Yeah.
See, how would you
Yeah.
compare this to the 1990s game, having at least looked at that?
The 1990s game looks super complicated.
Compared to this.
I
To
think
this, yeah.
it's supposed to be a shit ton of tables for
Yeah,
There's just tables and tables and tables.
Wasn't that the one where it's describing the Arcturians, which
as
is quite
insects
beautiful and
things?
that
Yeah.
like blind mole rat creatures.
Yeah. See, I've only ever looked in that one for random bits of lore. It's never been one I've really dived into. But no, this supposedly is a lot better to play. There are people online who I've seen who have played both and read through both, and they've said that this is infinitely better.
What was the one that was adapted from a role-playing game into like a free-to-play internet-based thing, and it was just you've got all the Marines?
That wasn't a role-playing game. That was just a board game. It was just a
that wasn't the
tabletop board game.
1990. It was a separate. Okay.
It was the same company. It was Leading Edge's Aliens board game, but it was literally just a board game. Right, just a board game, yeah. So I think we've probably talked out of mechanical stuff here and lore stuff, but before we sign off, I'd really like to know what your guys' favourite moments of your sessions so far have been. You know, any standout sort of moments where it's been like, this is awesome. Adam, why don't you lead us off?
So I think just one of the scenarios that Gaska wrote, Chariots of the Gods, having played through that one a number of times, just seeing the different ways it can go. Like you said, Aaron, sometimes we can kind of become rivals in our scenarios. But Caleb from our forum, who played your character in Chariots, he and I were essentially buddies when he was playing the same character that, you know, we tried to kill each other in the previous scenario. So even in the structured cinematic campaigns, seeing all the different ways that the story can go can add a real replayability factor to it. There's kind of unrelated here, but another video game I've been playing recently, Detroit Become Human, and it's a very, you know, carefully crafted narrative story experience, but there's also like a butterfly effect aspect to it where the story can go any number of different ways based on the choices your characters make and certain circumstances that happen. And I think that is true here as well. Even though you might be playing a highly structured, prepared cinematic story, it can go any number of different ways. Another one really cool moment was, again, this was Chariots of the Gods. My character was a technician and someone was trying to sabotage the reactor and activate the self-destruct. And I was on my own trying to go stop them. And I used the flamethrower on them, and that's when it revealed they were the secret android, and I was the only one who went after them. And I was like, oh, fuck. And they were already in Overwatch. I got a series of unlucky rolls, and they got 4 successes on me with a shotgun. So I was pretty much out for the count there. But it was still just a really cool experience. Like, oh, I'm going to go stop him. Oh, shit, he's the android. And then I'm dead. So, but I mean,
the player didn't realize.
Yeah. Didn't realize what?
Well, the player didn't realize that their character was going to be the android until the GM told them.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
No, they knew the entire time.
Oh, they knew?
Oh, I thought. Oh, okay. I thought
because sometimes the GM updates your secret agenda. But yeah, typically with androids, you know from the beginning if you're the secret android, I think.
The problem is with the secret android is once you've played it a couple of times, you'll know what their objectives are, so what they're doing. So what I've been doing is I've been putting that actual character's agenda in there as well. So they're doing both. So it throws you off. And it did. Yes, it worked. None of you knew.
I think another one of my favorite moments was in Hope's last day, because sometimes you can have disagreements with the rest of the group as to what the best way to survive would be and what the course of action would be. So who was playing with us, Aaron? It was you and Eric, right?
You mean when we split up?
Last day? Yeah, when we split up. You were going to go rescue someone outside, and I was like, fuck that. I'll meet up with you guys later. So I kind of go on my own little adventure in the upper level of Hadley's Hope Colony, and I run into another scientist, and we kind of have a secret discussion that the GM is playing out with me while they're in a different part of the colony, and then they enter the colony, and I'm going to meet up with them, but there happens to be an alien right at the entry, and they literally knock over a fire extinguisher while trying to stealth by it, and the alien kills them both. Like, oh my
Damn
god,
dice. Damn
shouldn't
dice.
have split up from me, but there's so
It was
many cool
you.
moments like that.
How did you play out that secret?
They took over the two other characters.
No, I think it means in terms of.
Yeah. So
Did you,
I
like,
just did
side
a
chat?
private chat. Yeah,
Chris?
side
Yeah.
chat with Chris.
It took like
and
half
we
an
literally
hour.
typed out our conversation while they were trying to survive against this alien.
So from an enjoyment experience, then at that point, taking in consideration, the technology that we're using to play it on, but you are still sort of, in this world. Was it still enjoyable? Was it still alien while you're fucking typing away to the GM while the other players are talking and acting it out? And
yeah, the only thing that kind of slows down for me is when you get into combat and you have initiative, and then everybody has to do their turn, and it's a lot more structured. So something that you would kind of think would be very fast, like combat, it turns into kind of like the slowest part of the game because everyone has their structured turn. Everyone has to make a decision in terms of a really heated moment that's life and death. So people are usually taking longer deciding what they want to do. And sometimes the GM will kind of spur that along. But that's the thing that kind of brings me out of it a little bit is combat, even though it can get intense and it can be really enjoyable. I think sometimes the turn taking element does get a bit too heavy in combat. But there's ways to alleviate that. Like, you can make this game. I really want to play this game with you guys. You're all UK based, right?
Yeah.
I am.
Jonesy isn't.
Oh, Jonesy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, regardless, the next time I go to the UK, we should really try and put together an actual session, because I think there's ways you could make it more immersive. Like, Chris, you've already used music in our playthrough sessions.
Yeah,
but
that actually really helps for atmosphere on these.
But
Yeah, I've seen,
tabletop,
people use monitors with the maps on them and everything, and it looks really cool.
Yeah.
I've seen people do like the mother interface as well,
Yeah.
where you can type it out.
Nice.
But again,
there's
a lot of the onus of that seems to fall on the game mother. The game mother seems to be the most responsible and, I guess, stressful part of doing the scenarios.
But it
They're
is
the
fun. It's very
shepherd, we're
rewarding.
their sheep.
yeah. But
There's
I
a
would
lot of
highly
effort that goes
recommend
into it.
a website called Tabletop Audio, not just for ambient music, because they have a number of sci-fi themed and alien themed ambient music that fits with the scenario, but also for sound effects. They have a full soundboard of alien type effects that work perfectly with this. So if you were to get a group together in person and create a room and create a moody atmosphere, I think you could have a really great time. And that's the experience I'm really looking forward to this game, is actually having an in-person playthrough session with friends.
Eric, any standout moments from your session so far? Anything that you could share that you think the listeners and the watchers would probably be like, yes, this sounds...
Yeah, no, I think it's basically, and it's something which this game, I will say, this game particularly handles well, where it is something unexpected, and it is purely down to the roll of the dice. It's things like where we just knew, as I said, this alien was coming along this air duct because it was obvious from the sounds and stuff, and I just had to make a split-second decision. We all did that, and we all shot at it, and it was a miracle, but we actually killed it with no casualties, no acid splash or whatever. It's either when something goes fortuitously, miraculously right, even if that's down to you having a secret agenda and convincing other players to go along with it, or it's when something completely disastrous happened, which we all go, what? But like when the character is the android, we were in the midst of this neomorph just coming out of an air duct, and it was attacking everyone at lightning speed. And they just literally, it came to this player's turn, and they said, I turn around, I open the doors, I lock them behind me, and I walk along. And what's going on here? But it really adds to that sense of everything's turned on its head. And you're in completely unfamiliar, and you have to improvise, even when you're in a life and death situation. So it's either when something goes astonishingly, hilariously, fantastically right, or it goes wrong in a way you didn't expect, or it's simply when we're playing with you and you get attacked by kinky facehuggers, because it always happens. And they're literally whiplashing you with their tails. They're not even leaping on you.
Facehuggers do love me.
So it's just those it's the unexpected. Whether that's something going really right, and it's like you can see the GM's face, and Chris is, I don't know what's happened here.
So I must admit, I enjoyed it the other night where I had Ava scrape against the bridge door, and you're all like, "Oh no, there's something outside." It's like, but she's friendly, but you don't know.
No, we don't. That's it. But that's what this game does it really well, and it's when the unexpected happens. Things flip on their head, and it can be in a good way, and it can be in a catastrophic way, but either way makes it an enjoyable, memorable experience. And even if you all or mostly die during it, it makes you go, oh, you know what? That game that we had the other night where X, Y, and Z happened, and it's always be based around something like that.
What about you, Jonesy?
Yeah, I'm gonna say kind of mirror what Adam said about the combat. That kind of like slows it down a little bit for me in terms of the turns and go around. I really just enjoy the actual like kind of detective mystery going around this map and figuring out, like looking at cameras, checking out, just trying to figure out what to do. That's my favorite part, I would say, about this. In terms of specific moments, watching Chris play a drug addict was pretty good. Plays a really good druggie. And then there was also I think it was Chariot of Gods. It may have been a shootout between you, Aaron, and Adam.
See, that's my favorite moment. Yeah,
that was crazy.
So that I always seem to play the backstabbers, and I think my favorite moment was certainly when me and Adam turned on each other in one session, and I tried to use like my talent to get out there and bail on them all in an EEV, and then one of the other players has gone to undock the ship, and the jolt causes a shot to go wild and ricochet and hit somebody. Didn't I end up killing you or something?
It was my character, Champ. Poor Champ.
And that was purely based on, you know, the roll of the dice and some other guy doing something there. And
so that was in Clara's game. She was brutal. She was
brutal. Say, yeah, you can head over. If anyone wants to witness that, they can check out Clara's YouTube channel. I think the videos are up posted on there.
Which is
I will say the secret agendas part of this itself brings out some memorable moments, because there is a point in doing that. If you follow them, you get a story point, which when it comes to the next act, you're given a story point, and you can choose to use it to make any action or whatever it is successful. You still have to roll dice to find out what degree it's successful, but there is it gives you an incentive to try and accomplish this secret agenda. And when you know you've got a secret agenda and you're able to achieve it in a way that nobody else realizes, that gives you a little yes moment, but nobody knows. That itself can be really rewarding in a way. You can't tell anyone until it's time for you to do. It can be something simple. It can be something as simple like my character had. I was thinking to myself when I had it, how the hell do I do this? Because it was like trying to get Wayland Yutani to give me an upgraded whole spaceship or something, but I managed to get the company rep to put in a good word on my behalf if we got back. And so I had to privately message Chris and say, does this count as a story thing? And he said, yeah. And I thought, yes, I just got it there. And it was like little simple conversation, but it gives you that little, and if you've got quite an elaborate a way of going about something, you need to do something which is quite nefarious, or it can be like my one, the first ever Hadley's Hope thing. I was after my character died, I was put in the synthetic, and I wasn't a secret synthetic. Everyone knew I was a synthetic, but I was, my secret agenda, my personal agenda rather, was to save everyone. Adam was convinced I was going to fuck everyone over, and we were on that thing
Because
where,
of what happened with Aaron.
yeah, and Aaron's character got face hugged, and I had to get on the ramp of the spaceship just so I could reload the gun and point it everywhere. And at that point, Adam decided to shoot me. But I was just trying to achieve my personal agenda of trying to save as many people as I got. But because of that, he got face hugged, and my character was like, it was shot in half, and it was functional, but technically I survived. But it came out of me trying to achieve my personal agenda, but it was misinterpreted by another character, and that in itself brought drama to the story in a way that if it hadn't been for that, it wouldn't have existed. So that little mechanic is another nice thing I like about this game. It adds to the story.
It is quite amusing when we're on Zoom or Skype while we're doing this, and you hear someone say, "Hey, GM, I've just sent you a message."
Yeah.
And everyone kind of knows something's going on in that moment.
Good part.
What about you, Chris? Any specific moments from the scenarios that you've done that you know?
So this one will be a good one for the people who like how deadly the creatures are. So none of you were present for this one, but during my first playthrough of Chariots of the Gods, one of the players on the bridge failed to do an observation roll, which meant that the alien got to ambush through a vent. In this case, it was a neomorph. It jumps out the vent, bites him in the throat, kills him outright. It then rolls at the beginning of its initiative. So it's got something like a 3 and a 4, and all the players were underneath. And then it leapt on someone and killed him outright. And then it turned again and killed them outright. And then they all tried to kill it with...
That's some sixes you were rolling, mate.
Sixes, yep. And then they tried to kill it with who was left. Bearing in mind there's only 2 characters left now. Because in three attacks, it's killed 3 players. They tried to shoot it. Miss. Back to the neomorph. 6. Tore his throat out. Next attack. 6. And it just
Are you sure your
murdered
dice
them
aren't
all.
loaded?
I reckon they are. I mean, I do use the swanky alien ones for... You can't see that because it's blocking it out, isn't it? But yeah.
Oh, I'll show them.
But man, the look on their faces, that was the first time that they'd come across. Everyone was really enjoying the game, and it was like, man, we've not really come across any aliens yet. And the first time that it happened, it just went through them all, and everyone was like, that was incredible.
And it is literally down to the gods of chance, because there's no way of...
It's a 1 in 6 chance of it being a fatal encounter.
Yeah.
It's really what makes the game is the behind the scenes stuff that either the moderator knows themselves, or we're trying to achieve personal agendas, or it's just rolls of the dice that are going on. It's like that game where we played where all the crew were potentially infected. At any time, Chris could have got this roll of the dice, and it could have been like 50% of them just suddenly started erupting. It didn't, but it could have, and it wasn't. And there was nothing any of us could have done to dictate that. Or the android, if we had chosen to wake her up, it could have been on our side, or it could have been plotting against it. There's nothing we can do to dictate that.
But what I love about this book is some of the flavor text that it gives you that you can read out, like when it's attacking. So here's like one of my favorite attacks for. So this is for stalkers, scouts, and drones. So this is a number 2 on the D6. And it says, playing with its prey. The Xeno attacks, but not to kill. The target is knocked to the ground and drops all handheld items, but otherwise takes no damage. The Xenomorph stands over them, taunting its prey to run so the game can go on. The victim gets +1 stress and must make an immediate panic roll. Now, in your head,
Lambert.
That is...
Yeah.
Wow.
It's Lambert.
Beautiful flavor text. But there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, I don't quite like the soldier and sentry ones where they decide to just jump at their target and explode.
It's not poetic enough.
I don't know why they do that.
Rah!
They're the boilers. The boilers.
No, they're not.
So,
Because that's Soldier of the Century, but
Yeah. Again, it's framework though. So if it's something you
Absolutely.
don't like, you
change
can
it.
amend it. Yeah. And does anybody have any specific points they want to bring up about the game before we just sort of give final recommendations or thoughts? Any specific elements you want to do?
Is it from a GM's point then? We'll go for. I wish there was more diversity for the beasties. So you do have lionworms from Mira Grant's novel. You
Echo?
have some of the locust type things from one of the bug hunt novels. But you're very limited for like creatures. So as a GM, you're going to have to put a lot of thought into like what type of things can they find on these different planets, and their attack rolls and their stats and how they attack and things like that. It's one of the big flaws that I do find with this game is that there's not a lot of diversity in that regard. So, I mean, it's easy enough to find attack stats for soldiers, synthetics, pirates. There's plenty of stats for that, but actual like native life forms that aren't our sacred 1-2-1s, we'll say, there's not a lot of them. I just wish there was more. It's one thing that I want.
But again, that could potentially be expanded upon in later core releases anyway.
I hope so. I know for a fact there are some new things in Destroyer Worlds because I've seen them.
Yeah. And in terms of like the variety of the aliens itself, I mean, the book does try and create further variety of the aliens in terms of like the caste system and stuff like that. And you've got, you have got like the neomorphs. You do have the five-field mutants, which the book
And you've got
calls
them all at different
abominations
stages as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're all at different stages of development.
And the sort of proto aliens from Covenant. So it does try and give you variety in that way. It does go that far. Okay, then final recommendations, final thoughts. Then, would you recommend this book, this game, to other people? Adam.
Yes, definitely. Especially if you were into the Alien universe, and especially if you were into tabletop RPGs such as Dungeons and Dragons. If you're into both, I think you'll love this. I hope it continues to grow and is expanded with further additions, new scenarios, rule expansions, things like that. I think there's a huge amount of potential here. And like I said, I think this could really become a big staple of the fandom moving forward. Are we doing scores, or we just recommend, don't recommend?
I mean, I wouldn't score it based purely on no frame of reference,
Just
but
recommend it.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. Are you going to do a written review, Aaron, for the site?
I want to at some point. I don't plan one immediately right now, but I certainly want to.
Yeah. Definitely highly recommended. I'm very much looking forward to the new scenario, Destroyer of Worlds, and going through that one. I got the nice, for those of you watching our video here, the 40th anniversary hardcover book, which I really, really like. But they still have the regular core rulebook available, as well as a new bundle that has just the starter kit, which is only the rules without the lore, as well as the new scenario, Destroyer of Worlds. But I'd highly recommend the core rulebook if you're into the Alien franchise, because of all the lore that it has. Like, that's the meat of what's here, I think, regardless of whether or not you want to get into the game. Even if you don't want to play the game, I still recommend the core rulebook just for the lore.
Eric?
Well, I'd say, if you're thinking of get it, do check up on how much it will be, because it's not cheap to get. But I think as long as you can find a way to find other people, preferably with at least one who's experienced with it, yeah, it's definitely recommend. If you want an RPG that's every bit as good as something like Warhammer or whatever, but based within the Alien continuity. I would say this does the job very, very, very well because it is essentially a sandbox mechanic. I would also say once I played it, I thought to myself, well, I can easily see how they could adapt this for other licenses like Terminator. They could do all kinds of things with like LA of 2029 with Skynet. You could easily take the same mechanics and do things like that. This has a lot of potential. So it's one of those products that now I've played through it, I'm very interested to see what kinds of expansions they do for the future, because there's a great deal of potential with this. So I'm very much looking forward. Yes, I would definitely recommend it if you're into. Is it possible to do an RPG in the Alien continuity? Yes, absolutely, yes, it is. And I would say this is pretty much the definitive RPG experience you would hope for in the Alien world.
Jonesy?
Yeah, I'm completely echoing what these two guys have said. I came into this wanting to find something to immerse myself into the Alien universe, and whether it's very minute actions that you take in the game or just thinking about the actual broad story, I think it completely achieves that. I think if you're afraid of not having people to play with, maybe you don't have like a community that you're doing this with, you can go on Facebook or the Alien RPG Discord or Free League's board, and you can find some people to play with. And even if you don't think you'll really ever enjoy role playing in this world, just get the book because it's so beautiful and it just adds a lot to the lore of the universe.
I think that is something that a lot of licensed RPGs tend to be a good resource of, is purely lore and world building. I mean, the old Alien stuff, even if you don't necessarily want to play the game, I'm talking the one from the 90s, it's interesting from a lore kind of perspective as to what crazy things they thought back then, Octurians. But with this one, like we said, half the rule book is lore, it is story building, world building, and it's interesting on its own right for that. In terms of mechanics, as somebody who has never necessarily enjoyed RPGs, what he's played and used to find the concept a bit intimidating as playing it out and doing the role playing, I've really enjoyed this. The mechanics work so well for the Alien universe, and the toolbox that is in here is fantastic. I mean, I haven't GM'd it yet, but I really want to. And having read through it fresh as prep for this, I got so many ideas for scenarios while reading this that it seems like it's going to be a good creative outlet as an Alien nerd, for throwing those ideas out there and playing with people. So yes, I fully recommend the RPG. Christoph?
Real quick, I forgot something. Beyond just the lore, I think another big part of the book being as immersive as it is the art, and I just want to reemphasize that and give the lead artist a shout out, Martin Grip. His work in here is awesome. Graphic design, Kristen Granith. Spaceship and vehicle art by John R. Milani, who's also done stuff in the Alien universe before for the Weyland-Yutani Report. There's some other artists as well that did the weapons. So there's some great art that supplements the lore in this book, and just more than I really expected. And it looks like that's going to be continuing on with the new scenario, Destroyer of Worlds.
Yeah, definitely. It is beautifully presented. No denying that as well. Chris, what do you think?
I would, again, absolutely recommend it. It is my favorite RPG. Even though I've been playing D&D for so much longer, I just love the mechanics in this game. Something that we've not really touched on is the fact that you can push rolls. So if you get a failed roll, or even a successful roll, you can take those dice and roll them again to try and get a bit more of an edge. Oh my! If I deal a couple of more bits of damage, like the creature might die, and it might make the difference between people living and dying. Or the fact that you can only do one action once. So if you fail to open a door and you've got an alien chasing you down a corridor, that door ain't opening because you failed. And I just love how grounded it is in the Alien universe, and to me, in that way, I think the mechanics really, really suit this game, between the stress and everything like that. I like how easy it is to pick up and play. I like how much lore there is in the book. I like how much content there is in it to help you make your own things. I mean, we've not even got into like the tables in there, which will help you create solar systems for your game. Or then you can say, oh, there's a job. What job are we going to go on? Roll it on a table. What are the complications? Roll it on a table. And it helps you create a structure to anything that you want to do. I don't even think D&D has anything like that in its books, really. It does for certain things, but nothing that's quite concise as what this is. Yeah, I just love this game. I mean, I'm actually looking forward to being a player once in a while. But I must admit, I absolutely love GMing and just seeing people's reactions when you say, there's a pling on your motion tracker and it's coming towards you. And that's all the information you give them. And you just see everyone go, okay. You know, it's one of those games where as holding all the cards and knowing what everything is, it is so much fun. Even getting to murder your friends is a lot of fun in this game. Even though, as I've always said, like, the game mother should always be secretly really rooting for the players. You shouldn't be outright be trying to kill them. Sometimes it just works out that way. Sometimes they just hold up in a corridor, hey, Adam, with a pistol. Yep. And you're like, I hope he runs. Didn't run. Okay. Yeah, I can't really recommend this game anymore. But if you're seriously considering it, and you don't quite want to spend the money on like the core book, and you're not too interested in the lore stuff, you just want to see what the rules are like and play a game, consider getting the starter set. But otherwise, if you've got the core book, I absolutely recommend that you do that. The scenario inside it for Hope's Last Day, it's not lore accurate because technically there's no survivors on the spaceship that are taken off. It's just a bit of fun. It'll help you and your players if it's your first time, because you know how this Hope, right? You've seen Aliens. It helps. It all helps get you stuck into that world. It's a nice, easy scenario with not a lot of text in it. It's got all the events nicely laid out. It's nice and easy to follow. And I 100% recommend doing it that way, then moving on to Chariot of the Gods. Because they'll know how squishy they are after that first scenario, let me tell you.
And it doesn't just force players to improvise. I've noticed it does force you as the GM to improvise. Sometimes I can tell we've done something you haven't quite thought of or planned on a contingency for, and I can kind of like see your mind working. Oh, okay, I better change this or whatever. And like one of us, I forget what it was, but one of us said, "Oh, what if can we explore the derelict, or what if we get hived? Can we still play on?" And you were like, "Well, I'll let you. We'll see how it goes." But, I mean, there's another. I think, Aaron, there was a point where you were getting attacked, or somebody else was getting attacked by a face hugger or something, and you didn't have it, but you had a blowtorch, and you said, "Well, wait a minute, this still does damage," and we were able to improvise in a way like a computer game or something wouldn't let you, and you did. I forget what it was, but it either let you have a chance of escaping with injury, or you managed to defeat whatever it was.
That was in his homebrew, yeah.
Yeah, but it forced things to be improvised in a way you wouldn't have ordinarily thought you'd be able to. But it's all down to looking at what's your inventory, looking at what your skill set is, and each different career role will have different. You get a particular special skill, and like the one who's a corporal, I think they get one where they can force other characters, if the other character rolls lower than them or something, to take damage or a risk on their behalf. But it's done in a way where you think, yeah, if this was an Alien film, this feels like it would totally fit in an Alien film.
Yeah, it is 100% thematic in terms of mechanic and lore. Yeah, can't disagree at all. And if you are interested in the game, there are plenty of actual plays, I think is what they call the RPG ones, on YouTube of people playing. That tends to be how I learn games these days, is watching people play them. So you can get a feel for the official stuff. You can get a feel for how it works with homebrew scenarios. We'll probably have our actual play of a homebrew up by the time this episode's live. I'm just waiting for RidgeTop to do me something, and then they're good to go. The RPG has a website, which is just alien-rpg.com, and you can check out some of the shops and the forums and look at some of the products on there. And there are peripherals for this as well. You know, you don't have to get them, but it's just in case you do. You know, the role-playing themed dice. You can play them with any old thing. But yeah.
I would recommend 2 different pools of coloured dice, though.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
One
For
for
your
stress,
stress
one for normal.
Yeah.
So just so you can differentiate them.
Also, if you want to get a cheaper version of the rules and a core book, you can go to Drive-Through RPG and you can download the PDF for I think it's about $10-15. So it's a good bit cheaper if you want just a digital version.
That's a good shout.
So it's very accessible as well. You know, we are really early on in this game's life, and we've played it nearly a year, and we've mostly been playing the same 2 scenarios with various new players, because we keep trying to introduce new players and stuff like that, and we still love it because everything turns out different. You know, I think you said it, Jonesy, was just how different every playthrough is, and it really speaks to the replayability of just it as it is now. Just imagine now when you've got more official scenarios, when more people have brought out homebrews and stuff like that. So the Effect podcast, we'll shout those guys out as well. They're a good resource for this, and they've done their own. They're a podcast, but they do their own actual plays on those, so you can just listen to them out and about, not necessarily sat in front of your computer or on your phone, whatever, watching some faces on a screen.
And so they wrote the one in the book, in the core book.
Yes, Hope's Last Day.
Day.
Yeah. There was a variety of games.
Didn't they write a good bit of Destroyer as well, I think?
Some of it, I think.
I think Dave did, yeah.
I think they refined it, was what they said.
Yeah.
And I think didn't Dave write the alien stats as well?
Yes.
So
yes, because it was a lot of fun. You'll find out. You'll find out in the video.
So those guys have had a hand in bringing the game to life as well, and its Effect with a K, I think.
Yeah,
that's
because I guess that's the Swedish way of spelling it. I assume, anyway. That's the rationale behind that.
Just wanted to be different.
But yeah, so in terms of housekeeping, I would just like to thank everybody who's listened or watched this. If you do have any comments on anything to do with the podcast, whether it's this episode, previous episodes, please do feel free to give us a shout on podcast@avpgalaxy.net or on the socials or on the website, wherever you're seeing this. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave us reviews on there. Let people know whether we're any good or not. I understand it helps in terms of our visibility on that platform as well as a podcast. I would like some listener suggestions on this, actually. is we're in the last half of the year, and at the end of every year, we always do an Alien versus Predator themed episode. Now, we've been doing the original comics the last 2 years, so we've done the original and we've done War. And I would like to know what people would like to listen to us do for this year's, whether you would like us to do the alternate sequel that is Hunter's Planet, or whether you would like us to continue with the comics and do 3 World War. So, listeners, please let us know your preferences in terms of that. And it lets me know what I need to tell Eric and Adam to go read in November. Anything interesting for people to know about? No, I don't really have too much planned at the minute, so nothing really to tease, I'm afraid. And we should hopefully be speaking.
It is worth pointing out to people who are a little worried about expenses and that this is not the kind of RPG where you have to spend money on little figurines or anything. It is just purely you have a map and they're like little paper counters or something. Actually, essentially, it's not even.
Can you see that?
Chroma keying.
Is it?
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go. You don't have to spend money on painting little figures. It's not one of those kind of RPGs. It's just you've got the thing and you've got everything you need essentially.
And if you're doing it at Roll20, you don't even need the dice.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see a number of increasing user-created content for you to implement in the game moving forward. I've already seen some stuff on the Facebook groups of people designing their own massive ships with internal maps and everything like that you could just incorporate into your own scenarios.
And I'm hoping to get together like a little resource of stuff like that on the website on AvP Galaxy. I mean, we'll be posting Chris's homebrew as well when he's content with that. And I'd like to get a little resource of things, of other custom scenarios up there as well. Adam, what are our socials?
If you'd like, you can find us on our website, which is avpgalaxy.net, and we are also on all the major socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. If you search either AvP Galaxy or Alien vs. Predator Galaxy, you're sure to find us.
And if you'd like to follow me personally, I'm on Twitter at _Corporal Hicks. That's it. Alien, Predator, Halo, Stargate, Airsoft, General Nerdy Bollocks. Adam?
If you'd like to follow me
Twitter
personally,
handle there.
It's at RidgeTop21 on both Twitter and Instagram.
Eric, have you sorted yourself out?
No,
okay.
I'm still shifting things over to ArtStation.
Jonesy, do you have any socials that you want to shout?
No, I'm a bit afraid of the social, but I'm on AVPG as Jonesy with a 0.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to come and get stuck in with fellow fans, we do have our own old school message board, which is just on avpgalaxy.net. Forums up there in the top right, I think. Come sign up, make an account, come get stuck in with us, and get stuck in with Jonesy. Chris?
Hey.
What? What's going on here?
Hey.
That's a great segue. I don't know what for, but
in terms of Chris's social outlets.
Oh dear.
If he cares.
Not really, I suppose. I don't really use them all that often. But if you've got any questions or anything, if you post them up on the boards or even under the post, I'm sure Hicks will direct me at them, and I will make the effort to help out if you've got any questions about the game.
Okay, cool. Right, well, thank you everybody for listening or watching. This has been Corporal Hicks.
RidgeTop.
Xenomorphine.
Jonesy.
So as a thematic sign-off from Hope's Last Day, this is the final report from Hadley's Hope. Shevvie reporting. The colony has been overrun by monsters. Of the 158 souls residing there, 1 has survived. The rest, well, I dread to think what has happened to the rest. I can only hope they were given the mercy of a quick death, but I doubt it. If you receive this message, do not attempt to rescue. Stay far away and inform the Colonial Marines as soon as you can. Only they can handle those monsters. This is Shevvie, signing off.